and welcome to Crossview Radio, a weekly podcast for Wayne County. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orrville. We exist to glorify God by exalting Christ and magnifying the gospel for the joy of all nations. Well, looking forward to today's podcast, and have a special guest on with us today. As you know, each podcast we kind of introduce as being a local podcast for Wayne County, and in light of that, wanted to just take an episode today to sit down with the mayor of Orrville, Mayor Dave Handwerk, and talk to him a little bit about our community and maybe some ways that we can be praying and encouraging him as well as our community, giving back, those kinds of things. So want to give a warm welcome to Mayor Handwerk. Mayor, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here with you.
Well, as we get started, I just wanted to maybe start with perhaps a little bit of autobiographical information, if you will, and maybe just ask you a few questions as we get started. Why Orrville? Why mayor? What made you want to run for office? What kind of drives you in that area?
Well, the why mayor is not one of those answers where you might expect where I grew up thinking I was going to be mayor of Orrville. I actually came back to Orrville after college with my wife and was a teacher for 32 years, 22 of those years in Orrville, and my first 10 years in Triway, but we actually were living back here in Orrville then, too. How I got into politics wasn't even an intentional thing either. I was one of those people that would ask someone questions. If I knew somebody worked for the city, I might ask, why are we doing this, or why do you do that? But as I was teaching school one day, I had a former mayor, Howard Wade, which goes back a few years, stopped in and peeked into the gym while I was teaching a class and asked if he could talk to me. And the class was getting ready to leave, so I said, sure, hang on a second. And he asked me if I'd be interested in being on city council. They had a person at the time that actually was a classmate of mine that was moving away, and he was in the middle of his term. And I said, I would be real interested in that. That's how I got started. I then spent 18 years on city council, of course, while I was still teaching and coaching. 12 of those 18 years, I ended up being city council president. And then as I was nearing my retirement date for teaching, I had several people in town say, you ought to run for mayor. And I hadn't really given that a ton of thought up to that point, but I thought, well, that would be a neat thing to do after I'm done teaching. And so that's what I did, and it worked out. And I guess why I continued on after that first time on council was just that I found it very, very interesting. It was interesting to see what goes on behind the scenes every day and why things do get done the way they are, and get the real answers for those things. And also the feeling that you are doing something to give back to the community. So that was important too.
How do those things, you mentioned you had an interest in seeing how things run behind the scenes. How do those things operate? Or maybe I could ask the question, this way, what do you do? What are the tasks that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, I get asked that every once in a while. What do you do? What's the mayor's job? And it's not actually an easy question because every day is different. And that's kind of what I like about the job, too. But there are days, as I mentioned to you earlier, where it is running from one meeting to the next all day long, whether it's here in Worcester or Columbus, even Washington, D.C. sometimes. And then there are days where I don't have a ton of things on the calendar, and those are the days that I work on our Orrviews article or writing different reports and things that have to be done. And then there's daily things that have to be signed in order for work to continue. Just about all the travel that any of our employees do for training and everything, the final signature ends up being on my desk. And so those are things that you want to do and keep up to date so that they're not held up trying to do what they're doing.
anything in particular that you do that maybe most people wouldn't think, maybe don't know about, or wouldn't think a mayor would do something of that nature? Small tasks, I don't know, anything.
Well, doing podcasts. First one of those, although I've done some other interviews before, but so that's an interesting one. But, next week I'm reading to the elementary kids for Right to Read Week at our school. Sometimes I'm writing a proclamation to do for somebody's 90th birthday or anniversary of some kind. It's just really a wide variety of things.
Sure.
A lot of times people might say, well, then you're just doing the shaking hands and kissing baby stuff. And I would have to say I would really disagree with that. That's part of it, and I think that's a part that people like to see out of their mayor. But if that was truly all there was to this job, I wouldn't be interested.
Sure.
I like being part of what actually is happening day to day here.
Yeah. And I've seen, I've seen things maybe in the paper, things from time to time where maybe you're, I think, was it a while ago you had painted Smith Orr homestead? Well, that might have been a while back now.
It's been now probably 5 years or so, but yeah.
Little things like that. I think maybe you mentioned at the State of the City address the other night, you had done some painting as doors here.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize that's probably a small thing, but from a pastoral perspective, I think that's encouraging just to see a faithfulness in the mundane, maybe, just a humility, willing to do things that no one else would think, that you would do. So I know it's small, but I appreciate that kind of thing. So,
the Smith Orr homestead was not a small one. That that turned into be a lot of work.
Sure.
But it got done, and it needed to be done, and they had no money to do it. So I was glad to help do that.
What do you think are maybe the most challenging and rewarding parts of what you do?
On a day-to-day basis, I'd say the most rewarding is just the feeling that you were able to help somebody. Whether it's a phone call that says, hey, I don't understand why this is happening, or, my trash wasn't picked up. It doesn't matter. My goal is to make sure I find out what the issue is and try to solve it.
Sure.
Probably the most disappointing thing is when you have to tell somebody, I can't help you.
Yeah.
That's not what we do. It's not in our line of work. That's not our job to do this or that, because they're calling just for help. Now, even in those cases, sometimes you can point them in the right direction. If it's not a city problem, you can get them to the people they need to talk to. So that still helps.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about, and certainly just, can share briefly, but just a little bit about the history of Orrville, how it came to be, those kinds of things. What can you share about that?
Well, Orrville was founded as a railroad town. It really grew up around a railroad stop for the railroad that was coming from one destination to another, and we were in between. So it was a refueling station for water and firewood for the engines. And so that's why there's kind of a real railroad heritage here in town. And a lot of people don't really associate with that so much anymore like they used to. As a child growing up in Orrville, we used to have lots and lots of trains going through town.
Sure.
In fact, I didn't live too far from the tracks, so you could hear them every night while you're in bed, and got used to that. But we have less trains, obviously, than we did a long time ago, but there are still a fair amount that come through. So that's basically the history of how we got started, and as that first fueling station got put in, then pretty soon you have other things pop up with hardware stores and other jobs for people to do and things like that.
Yeah. What do you think, and maybe in light of where we've been as far as the beginning of Orrville and where we are today, are there any specific challenges that we face as a community? And maybe this would go into spill over into another question, but what can we do as a community, as individuals, as churches to give back to the community kind of thing?
Well, first to talk about challenges, I think there's different levels of challenges that we have. the big picture challenges are that we are blessed with great industries in this town. And just about everyone that we talk to, and we do try to meet with our major industries at least once a year, if not more often, to see how things are going. What we're hearing now from almost all of them is that we have jobs, we have a need for people, and a lot of times they're running into trouble finding people. We have a lot of people that come into Orrville to work. You know, you hear sometimes people complain about all the ones that, you know, leave town or work someplace else or don't live here, but we have a lot of people that come to Orrville to work, and I'm not talking about just Smuckers, which somebody might think, oh yeah, that's it. But there's a lot of other companies that have a lot of people that come here every day, and we want to make sure that we still continue to have people to fill those jobs. So if there's people out there that are in need of work, there's jobs in Orrville, but what we hear from those employers all the time is it's hard to find people now for the basic jobs in the factories where, you know, the drug testing is important, and people that can pass drug tests, and people that are willing to work and actually put in a full day's work like they're expected to. So those are concerns. In the smaller picture, issues that we have, I think just in general, we have a lot of different distinctions of people. We have people that are so caring for their neighbors and caring for their property, and that's what makes Orrville a neat community to live in. I think it's disturbing now to see sometimes how many people don't care about their property, and I don't care whether you're a renter or a property owner. You know, I rented once when we first got married, and that place looked better than when I left it than it did when I came in. Simple things like keeping grass mowed and shoveling sidewalks and taking your trash containers back off the street. Those aren't pretty to look at. It's a necessary thing, but we've asked and asked and asked people to please take those back and put them away. And, you know, some are great at that. You can see them almost go out as soon as the truck goes by and take them back in. And I know that not everybody can be that dependable, but the ones that just get left out from week to week are really frustrating. And I know somebody might say, well, you know, do something, give them a ticket or fine them. But, you know, then you're talking about taking another employee. That would be a full-time job, just going around trying to do that sort of thing.
Going back a minute ago, you were talking about, I was curious to ask you this because you said there are a lot of job opportunities, but maybe looking for people. If someone's out there right now who's looking for a job in Orrville, is there a good place for them to go to find that, where it might be posted?
Well, yeah, there's a number of places you could at least check to start with, but one is even the Chamber of Commerce. They usually have a listing of whoever gives to them.
Gotcha.
And that's up to the companies if they choose to notify the chamber of what openings they have. You know, nowadays with the computers and web pages that every company has, a lot of times they have their own openings listed. And they'll tell you how they want you to apply. Some of them actually want you to still come down to the company. Some of them are all run with employment agencies and things like that. But chamber would be a good place to start. You know, even Mike Hedberg here that runs our economic development has a pretty good feeling for what companies are looking for now. And I think the nice thing now is you're talking about a wide variety of skill levels. You know, we're talking basic, you just come to work and we'll train you for what we want you to do. All the way up to companies that are looking for engineers and so forth.
What other ways do you see that we can, you know, maybe give back to our community kind of thing? I mean, sometimes we're disconnected between just our daily lives and just the operation of the community and the needs there. What are some ways that maybe we're not aware of that we can be helping giving back?
Well, aside from those things I mentioned about just taking care of your own property, whether it's yours or a rental property, there's lots of areas to volunteer. And the thing I notice being involved in a lot of different things in town is how often I see the same people at meetings. you know, it might be a wide variety of different things, and yet it's that same core of people.
Sure.
And those people are a blessing because that's what makes Orrville what it is. But there is always room for more people
Sure.
To help, and that can be from Heartland Education Committee to, you know, United Way to the Boys and Girls Club, all that sort of thing.
Anything in particular, maybe that resources that are available to the community that we're not aware of? Anything in that realm, that area?
I don't know that people would or wouldn't be aware of, but we do have a lot of agencies that are connected. Some of them are in town, like United Way. Others are more connected through the county, but there's still somebody that can certainly get them pointed in the right direction if they're looking for a particular agency or a help agency.
So I'm going to read a portion of Scripture, and I wanted to ask you maybe a follow-up question to that. But well-known passage of Scripture, 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 through 2, says, "First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way." And so, of course, Scripture exhorts us to pray for those who are in leadership over us. And certainly we could go to Romans 13 as well and see the fact that government is instituted by God, and so it's something for our good. We ought to joyfully submit to those who are in leadership over us, pray for them, encourage them. I think perhaps in our culture today, I don't know if this is social media or what, but we tend to be... we complain a lot more than we actually are willing to step in and help. And sometimes, you know, too, I think it's a struggle with even the media. Even as we talk about today, we don't see all your daily jobs. We just see what the media has decided that we should see. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just kind of the nature of it. And so we don't always see what's going on, and sometimes we don't understand what the needs are and that kind of thing. So we tend to be, people tend to complain. We tend to see the problems and yet not want to, lend a hand or that kind of thing. But we did talk a little bit about how we can be better involved. But from the prayer side, what can we do as a church to better pray for our local government, pray for you guys, and lift you guys up that way? What can we do in that regard?
Well, before I answer that part, just going back to even the complaining part, we do get a good amount of that. And I think one thing I would just encourage people to do is, if you have something that you think is a real issue, is to contact us and at least let us give you answers.
Sure.
Because I've had so many times where somebody's mad as a hornet when they talk to me about something that's been going on for 3 or 4 months.
Sure.
So the anger is built up in them. It is something I have no idea that they're even mad about.
Sure.
And so if they would contact us, a lot of times they get an answer and you get that magical, oh, I didn't know that.
Sure.
That's why you do that.
Sure.
And then it makes sense even sometimes, which is always helpful.
Yeah.
As far as what can the general public do as far as praying, I've had you, for one, John, and I've had other ministers just email me from time to time and say, hey, I'm praying for you today. Sure. I got to say that when I get those, it's almost like, I'm not surprised because this week went really well. And that doesn't mean it always will, but it certainly, it helps to know that people are thinking about the job, and
Sure.
it's not always easy, and
Sure.
and that people do care what's going on.
Anything else in either of those two categories that would come to mind? Ways to reach out, ways to pray, ways to be involved, other than things that you've already mentioned?
Yeah, well, the praying part is, anybody that's doing that for any of our city employees, just urge you to continue. I appreciate that. The other thing is my door is always open. I've said that since the day I took office, and the only reason you can't talk to me if you come in is if I'm at a meeting someplace and not here, or I've already got somebody in here. You don't need appointments. My only reason for having you call first would be that you don't make a trip down here and find
Sure.
out that I'm in Worcester at a meeting or
Sure,
something. So,
sure. No, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and that's been. We were talking a little bit before the podcast here, just about when I first came down or first came up from South Carolina, and that was exactly true. I mean, you welcomed us in your office and been here a couple times, and so really appreciate your willingness to listen and that kind of thing. So, what does the future of Orrville look like from your perspective? Things on the horizon, things that you'd like to see accomplished, things that you'd like to see us grow in. What does that look like?
Well, population-wise, we haven't grown a lot. The 2000 census had us at 8,500.
Okay.
The 2010 census had us at 8,300. So technically, you could say we got smaller. We're not convinced those numbers are exact because obviously there's people that maybe didn't fill out their census papers. Our utility director said we've got more electric meters out than we did before, so how are there less people? But to say the least, we're staying about the same.
Sure.
Now, I don't know what it'll say when we come up with the 2020 census. If it is an increase, it's probably not going to be a big one. But we have some steady growth going on. We have some areas where there's some building going on, some housing units, whether it's personal houses or rentals or whatever, that will allow more people to live here. You know, we're a little bit landlocked, so we can't just grow by leaps and bounds like some people do in other areas. So individually and people-wise, that's kind of where we're at. Industry-wise, as I said before, we're just extremely lucky. And we have two, we call the first one an industrial park, the second one was called our business park. Those are both full. And so we're in the process now of, trying to figure out how we can afford to start a third industrial park, because the worst position to be in is to have some big company that's really interested in locating, and then they find out there's no place for them to go.
Well, I appreciate your input today. Appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day. I know you always got to rearrange your schedule for these kinds of things, and so it's been a joy talking with you, and we'll continue to pray for you and encourage you. And then if there's anything else that we can do, feel free to contact me or contact us, and be happy to minister in whatever ways we can. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to Crossview Radio. I'm John Marino, pastor of Crossview Church in Orrville. We meet Sundays at 10 a.m. at the Orrville YMCA. To find out more about Crossview Church, visit us online at crossview.org.